My name is Anita Nair and I'm a writer living in Bangalore in India. The story that I'm going to be telling you is not set in Bangalore though. It's set in a very small village called Mundakottukurushi in Kerala. Mundakottukurushi is about 500 kilometers away from here, and that is where my parents live. So I go there every few weeks. Now, ever since I was a child, I have always heard my father refer to a particular train that he would catch from Shoranok, which is the nearest railway junction, and get off at Vallapura, the station which is closest to Mundakottukurushi. He would talk about catching the Nilambur passenger train, and all through my childhood and even into my adult years, the idea of traveling on that train was something that had caught my fancy. I kept thinking about it and I kept wanting to do it, but somehow I could never get around to finding the right time to be able to get onto that train. Now, the interesting thing about this train is that it's one of the shortest train routes in the country. I don't think the entire journey lasts longer than an hour and 45 minutes at the most. So I kept thinking that one day they're going to, stop this train and I will never be able to make that journey that has been part of my imagination for so long. So I was talking to a travel magazine that I write a column in, and I was telling them about this specific train and this journey that I had wanted to take, and they said, why don't you do it, before it's too late? And I said, right, I'll do it, and maybe I'll write a feature about it. And so the travel magazine sent a photographer and a facilitator to ensure that the journey was smooth and everything was in place. So one morning, it was the month of February, some years ago, one morning these two gentlemen came to my place in Mundakottukurushi, and we left for the railway station, which is just about 4 kilometers away from my house. And my first surprise was on discovering the station building. It was tiny and it was quaint, and there was hardly anybody there. It was an empty railway station, which in India is not usual. And then they went and got the tickets, and when they gave me my ticket, I was in for a second surprise, because the ticket was a cardboard card, unlike the printed out form which you get anywhere else in the country. And I felt as though I was stepping back in time, and this feeling persisted with me all through the journey to Nilambur. Now, when we got to Nilambur, the next question was, what are we going to do here? Nilambur is very well known for its teak plantations, and mostly people go there because they are timber merchants. Now, I had no interest in actually visiting a teak plantation. And then I remembered that what Nilambur also has is a very well-known potter's colony. The potters there are more artists than craftspeople, and they create an incredible array of terracotta ware. So we went there, and I met the potters and their families, and they showed me how they go about the entire process, and we had a long conversation on how they make their livelihood and how difficult it is increasingly with people buying terracotta randomly and not as they used to on a regular basis. And the interesting thing about these potters are that they are not originally from Kerala. They are from another state called Andhra Pradesh, and they speak a dialect which is a mixture of Telugu and Malayalam. So I was there until about 4 o'clock, and we shot several pictures, and I had enough material to write my feature. Just as we were about to leave, I turned to the facilitator and I said, look, I don't want to catch the train back because it's just going to be a repeat of the journey that we did. Instead, could we drive back? Now, the train journey had been very interesting and beautiful because the landscape that we went through was mostly fields and wooded areas, and there wasn't too much of human habitation, which is not again usual in Kerala because everywhere that you go you see people. However, on the way back in the car, we went through several small towns and villages, etc. And it was a different sense that I got about that journey, almost as if we were just going from point A to point B. And then we came to this bridge which goes across this river Kuntipura. And as we got onto the bridge, from the cab window, I could see a man in a boat. He was some distance away, but he was alone in the boat. He wasn't fishing. There wasn't any goods in his boat, so he wasn't ferrying anything. He was just in the boat, rowing very, very gently. Now the river also had become a languorous river as summer had begun to set in. During the monsoons, it's a big river heaving with current, and it's a river that's swollen and it kind of encroaches the shores, etc. But in the month of February, when the heat had already begun, the volume of water had lessened, and the angry, fuming river had turned into this languorous river, which just seemed to kind of be there without moving. And I was struck by this great desire to be on that boat, and just be on that boat and experience the languorousness of that river. So I turned to the facilitator and I said, "Do you think it's possible for you to organize for me to be able to get onto that boat?" He looked at me, smiled and said, "Why not?" So he asked the cab driver to park the car. The photographer, the facilitator and I stepped out, and we walked to the end of the bridge, and there we saw a rough path leading down to the river shore. So we went down to the river bank, and there these two men stood there and they waved and hollered till the man in the boat saw us and he came closer to the shore. And when he came closer, the facilitator called out to him and said, "This lady is a writer and she's writing a piece about this area. Do you think you could give her a ride, because she'd like to write about that as well?" And the boatman was just as enthusiastic, and he said, "Absolutely, come along," etc. And so the three of us waded into the water and got into the boat, and then he began rowing. And there was something about that particular moment in time, a very languid boat on a very languorous river. There was a gentle breeze that scaled the top of the waters and lifted with a cool touch onto all our faces. In the distance, I could see two men fishing. They were standing waist deep in water. And what they did was they took a net and they flung it into the water, and then they scooped it out, and when they scooped it out, there was fish in the net. There were water birds in the river, and there was an array of bird song coming from the trees that lined either side of the river. The sun had begun setting, and it was a particularly beautiful evening. The clouds had not taken over the skies, and so it was still a kind of greyish blue with streaks of red. And I was sitting there in the boat, and I thought, I just wish this could be my life, of just going back and forth on this languid river without ever having to hurry or having to do anything that would make me have to rush. I was in a spell, and a little later the spell broke, and when I came out of the spell, the writer in me awakened, and I started talking to the boatman. And I asked him what he did. I asked him, are you a fisherman? Are you a farmer? Why is it that you're rowing this boat? Where are you going? He looked at me, smiled, and without batting an eyelid, he said, I'm a sand smuggler, so I'm just scouting areas to see where I should pull the sand out tonight. And something in me stirred, because sand mining is a very, very serious crime, especially in Kerala, where the rivers have been emptied out of sand by sand smugglers, pretty much. And if they are caught, they are, punished quite seriously. But these sand smugglers are very difficult to trap because they function by stealth. They usually get out and do their sand mining probably at 2 and 3 in the morning, and they load their boats and carry the sand to elsewhere from where it's distributed into the marketplace. So there is a thriving smuggling process going on to this day, and no matter how hard the government has tried, they have not been able to stop it because the sand mafia is so powerful. Nevertheless, I thought it was very, very foolish and courageous of that man to admit to being a sand smuggler. And I looked at him and I said, don't you feel guilty about what you do, that you're systematically plundering the river and ruining it and ruining the environment? And he said, of course I know what I'm doing is wrong, but how do I make a living? There is no source of livelihood in this village. There is, he has some farmlands, but farming is no longer viable, and he cannot hire himself out as a farm laborer because machines have taken over pretty much most of the farming activity. So he has no option but to make a livelihood out of the river, and this was the only livelihood opportunity available for him there, because the river isn't rich with fish either for him to become a fisherman. And something in me, like I said, stilled at that point, and I kept thinking, what do I do when we get to shore? Do I go to the nearest railway station and report this man for what he's doing? Give them his name and address and his telephone number, which he had shared with me? Or do I keep quiet? Because this man also has several mouths to feed. He is the sole provider of a family that consists of his wife, 2 children, elderly parents, and a few other relatives that he is responsible for. There is no way he can earn a living in the village, and he would need to go away to the nearest big town or to a distant city to be able to find a job that would give him at least a daily wage every day. But again, there are no guarantees. So this man had chosen to live in this village and make his livelihood out of something which was criminal and could put him behind bars if he was caught. So I don't have an answer. To this day, all the way back in the river till we reached the shore, this question haunted me. What do I do? Do I go to the police? Do I keep quiet? To this day, I don't know if I did right or wrong by keeping quiet. Do you have an answer for me?